I wanted to show you. So I was like, obviously, you would want to do something with this in your classroom. And we've talked about lesson planning. So I tried to make a lesson plan that kind of went with that. And I was thinking just, who would play video games, maybe make it for middle school. I was thinking it would take like 2 sessions essentially using geometry, using data analysis, learning about Hidatsa culture, integrating that. And so these are some materials I would want for my students to have. And then you can kind of see I did a little lesson, what it would look like. I have this primary source for them. Then, just kind of talking about geometry, what they would be doing. I used to teach elementary school, fifth grade math. So I was trying to think of like, okay, what would be appropriate? I was also thinking that it'd be cool if they built mounds using 3D models like clay or sand, pretty inexpensive. I realize it's a lot for teachers to prep, but I've been working with some STEM and indigenous STEM, and I think, the more hands-on you can make it, the better. So it'd be like kind of a cheap, cost-effective way, and then have them mark locations for where those would go based on Buffalo Bird Woman's chapter, and then have them talk about, their thinking, why they place things the way they place them. And maybe there's not like necessarily a correct answer, but like if you could follow their logic and how they referenced to come up with their conclusion would be what I'm looking for. And then the next day, so they would track growth for each crop for 4 weeks, and they could do like a line graph. And this could be done in the game. Like you could like use the game as a way to track, or you could actually plant seeds if you wanted. And then, although if you did that, definitely want to read Buffalo Bird Woman because she talks about which to plant first, and there's a process that you go through. But you could even just use basically the game to do that. And then you could talk about how Hidatsa used math and their agriculture. And then you could also talk about it maybe with relationship to the success of the crops, and even building the stage. This would maybe be more of a discussion, but you could bring that in. And then so just kind of thinking where that would fit in the game. So both mission 1 and mission 2, that would make sense. Like as they're doing the mission, that would complement what we're doing. And then you can kind of see, like, obviously schools want to be ensured that you're assessing students and you're aligned to state standards. So I had some tasks for them to do, including calculating the circumference, creating this 3D mound. Also, they could line graph using the game. They could calculate the growth. They could explain their rationale. And then it'd be cool to get them to like go into the culture a little more. A lot of states require Indian education for all, or something to that effect. So I always like to try to include that. And I meant to make that the first task because I think it's most important. And then I just made a rubric to go with it. I know sometimes that's important. And then just talked about, so we're in North Dakota, so I tried to align them to the standards so that everybody would be on the same page. So anyway, that was just kind of a lesson that I had an idea. I've taught like every grade level, honestly, from kindergarten through graduate schools. So, but I was thinking like, who would this game be for? And I was imagining, especially like middle school makes sense. I heard Jennifer saying she's in high school. So, and it sounds like your game might be more geared towards high school. So, feel free to go with that as well. Pause and see if anybody has other thoughts, questions, critique, etc.
I don't know if you knew this, but a kind of cool thing is we already have two games that include agriculture and include corn, in fact, and statistics. And so one of them is Meet the Maya, and of course, the Aztecs were particularly, so there's some discussion Aztecs in there. The Aztecs particularly were big farmers, right? Because they had Maria probably could pronounce it better, Chiapas, the kind of graduated terraced hillsides where they planted. And so in Meet the Mile, there's actually a game where they're catching corn in baskets and they're computing different things that impact the amount of corn that you can grow. And then in Making Camp Navajo, because the Navajo also grow corn, there's a discussion ratio. And it wasn't because obviously they're, as we were just saying, they're a different nation and they do things differently. It wasn't ratio like with the three sisters, it was ratio of how many corn plants you get for however many seeds you plant, because it's not 1 to 1. Like you're lucky if you plant, 5 seeds, you might get 3 plants. And so anyway, there's already two games that do that sum. And I thought, let's say we did make this game, having three of them like that would be a good thing to say, not every tribe is the same. And even if they look even superficially the same, like the Hidatsa and Mandan grow corn and the Navajo grow corn and the Aztecs and Mayan grew corn, it was actually the way they did it was different. And the
Mhm.
things they thought about were different. So I think it's kind of cool. And we could certainly, there's a lot of things that you talked about in that game design that we could certainly do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I was actually thinking of Camp Navajo. I've been to some of your presentations where you brought that up, and I was like, oh, that's something that like fits in what you already do or what you can already think of. So and that's funny you said that because that was definitely in my thinking. I should give them more credit when I presented this. And then another option would be to flesh out a game. So certainly if you want to play with what I have, feel free. I think Dr. De Mars has sent that out. And so you could improve upon it or make another mission, make another level, or and this would I think be better, do something that's more locally relevant to you, whether it's Anishinaabe, whether it's whatever's going on in California. Aren't there like 127 nations or something like that? I'm probably not even close. It's a big number.
You are close. I was just at something at Pachanga a month or so ago, and I think they said there were 123 separate tribes in California and over 50 in Southern California, where I live. So it's where you all are in North Dakota, or where Juliana is in South Dakota, where they basically have Lakota and Dakota, or you have, five tribes up there. It's way easier. We're out here. And that's why I was asking the question, if you're going to have something about a nation, how do you kind of vet that? And somebody, and I know Maria knows him too. I'm trying to remember. I'm not going to say his name because I'll probably get it wrong. But anyway, somebody that I met up here in Northern California, where I just happen to be at this moment, but he's from a very small tribe. I think there's less than 1,000 of them. And he said, I understand that my tribe is not big enough that there's ever be a game made about them. But when I was a kid, if, we showed up in one level, if there was a guy from my tribe, that they talked about or something about, he says, that would have made my year in middle school because we were almost invisible. I think that's something we can maybe do too. I mean, like Ojibwe, there's a lot relative to some of these tribes in California. There's a lot of Ojibwe. I mean, I could think off the top of my head, there's Turtle Mountain and there's Red Lake and there's White Earth and then there's all the folks up in Canada. In contrast, like you said, Dan, out here, there might be a very small number of people. If we have a lesson that just kind of brings them in, or like I tried to do that near the end of the Warrior Vetscape. Hey, dang, I don't know what's up. Maybe the Cherokee just have a really good PR firm, or there's a lot of Cherokee. Did you know 3 of the Congressional Medal of Honor winners in the Vietnam War were Cherokee?
Hmm.
So, but I did try to find people from different nations to include in there. And that's something I wish we did more of and better. And Dean Dufresne, tell him, I don't know if you know Dean, Zach, because he's enrolled in Turtle Mountain, but he's grew up in Spirit Lake. But he's one of the answers. I'm going to send him a link to the game. He's one of the people in the Warrior Vets game. Because, and I'm getting off topic here, but I'm going to, in the Warrior Vets game at the very end, one of the things that I wanted to say is that somebody can be notable, like who's worth studying, right? Somebody can be a hero like Mitchell Red Cloud Jr., right? Who was defending the retreat of his battalion in the Korean War and was shot and literally tied himself upright to a tree to keep firing and saved all these other people that lived and he died. So, I mean, that person's a hero. But then there's also people like Marcel LeBeau, who was a nurse, but then she came back and she taught for 30 years on her reservation. There's Dean Dufresne, who was in the Marines, but then he came back and he founded a nonprofit to help vets with disabilities after the war. So both of those things can be people who are worth learning about. And I think that's one of the questions in history. And this is why I teach math and not history, because I think it's easier to just say, okay, the standard deviation is the square root of the variance, and that's the end. We are making a judgment of who are the people that we should learn about. I mean, it's nice that you learn about people who are war heroes, but I think it's also good to learn about those people, like T.C. Cannon, who came back from the Vietnam War and became a really amazing artist. And a lot of people mention, I forget his name, the veteran who was in Iwo Jima. and he was one of the people raising the flag. But his life after after World War II did not go well. So
Ira Hayes.
yeah,
Hmm?
remember? And
Yeah, the Johnny Cash song.
yeah. And, so instead we featured people like Joseph Oklahombi, like Joseph Medicine Crow, people who Dr. Medicine Crow came back and he wrote 11 books on military history and was the first person first tribe to get a master's and was on the, when I was looking him up, he was on the board of the Montana Historical Society. And one of the things that we kind of discussed when Juliana and I were at the National Council on Social Studies a couple of weeks ago, and they had a Teaching with Primary Sources consortium. And is when do you teach kids, or at what level do you teach them some that basically there was genocide in this country, right? And Native Americans got murdered and lots of really horrible things happened. And there were people like Ira Hayes who had very sad into their stories. And we decided, at least for that first game, to make it people who had good stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just getting out of the like, let's learn about a Native American history, open up your textbooks and looking in this like total historical, back when they rode horses and didn't have electricity, and then, taking them into like, actually, they're still here, they're still thriving, they're still making a difference, they're still heroes, and they're right here in our classrooms.